What's up, guys? So we're at the Navy Pier, Chicago. So yeah, guys, those are the Sea Dogs, Sea Dog 3, Sea Dog 1, Sea Dog 2. And they go all around the pier. So I'm gonna check it out. So right now, guys, we're about to get on the Sea Dog 2 and go for a little ride. I'm gonna show you guys once we get there.
This is the 75-minute architecture tour. I gotta let you guys know really quick, it is looking like it's gonna rain a little bit while we're out there at 6 o'clock. And also the waves are pretty high today, so there will be no speedboat portion. So, you know, if you want to get your refund, we understand you can get that now. But the architecture store is still going to be really good. So if everyone's in the right spot, you go to right. All right, well, we are getting right underway. Yeah, all right. Well, we have a great crew today, so please let me introduce you. First off, on the steering wheel today, we have one of the best captains in the Midwest. Give some love to Captain Swag. Backwards, he's gonna stop me from drowning because I don't know how to swim. We got Eric. He will be your first mate. Last guy I want to tell you guys about. I'm a big fan of this guy. I've known him as long as I've been alive. I'm bald. My name's Pat. Nice to meet you guys. Yeah. No, it's fine. All right. Well, welcome aboard the Sea Dog. We're gonna have a really good time today. Before we get underway, we just gotta go under a few ground rules. First rule of the Sea Dog is you don't talk about the Sea Dog. Second rule also. Third rule is no standing up at any. Welcome you to Jurassic Park. Alright. Very cool. It's a very beautiful thing. The river has come a long way. One of the things that we said when we wanted to keep the lakefront for the enjoyment of the public is that bridge right there is a street called Lakeshore Drive. And everything in front of that should never be any private property. No private condos. So you might wonder how this giant fidget spinner of a skyscraper got past that regulation. Well, they had a very clever loophole. If you look at Lakeshore Drive, you're going to see a little off-ramp. That off-ramp comes right up to Navy Pier. They reasoned that the off-ramp was part of Lakeshore Drive, and therefore they could go behind the off-ramp. That loophole was closed right after it was open. So this is the only building that you will ever see on the other side of Lakeshore Drive that is not public property. So this is Aqua Tower. This is a beautiful modern design of architecture. It was actually based off of a design by a famous German architect, Ludwig Mies van der Rohe, and it was going to be built in Berlin in the 1920s. I don't know if you guys know anything about Germany in the 1920s, but it never got built. So we built it here. And it has this very clever Y shape to it. And the reason for that is because when you're in a high-rise on a skyscraper, it's kind of like being on a ship in a storm-tossed ocean. The wind will push the building and you can feel it sway. So a lot of buildings have had to come up with these really clever designs to fight off high wind. The Y shape is no exception of that. It kind of causes the wind to wrap around the building. It's supported by 9 central elevators, very heavy steel in the center of the structure, so it doesn't sway as much. A lot of famous people live there. Tom Cruise most notably lived there. Oprah never did though. I think she has a house somewhere in the suburbs or something. But very cool. So that's the modern style of architecture. You can tell because it has all glass panes on the outside, but it's nothing really too spectacular, and the glass panes aren't reflective. Right behind us, we have the Lakeshore Bridge, and believe it or not, Chicago is a very famous bridge city. We experimented with a few bridges. The first movable bridge we had in Chicago was a little wooden drawbridge, and it would get stuck so much that the citizens of Chicago famously came with axes and hacked it down. Then we tried a drawbridge, which is kind of will turn and allow the ships to pass.
Trump Tower.
But it's a very famous cattle city, so a bunch of cattle were on it one day, and they panicked, ran to the top side of the bridge, and it totally toppled. So we actually came up with this style bridge, a Bascule trunnion bridge, and it opens on both sides. Notably on this bridge, in 2004, we found a homeless man living inside of this bridge. He said he was living there for 3 years. His name was Richard Dorsey, and he had managed to hack into the city's electric electrical system. So he had a PlayStation, a TV, a space heater. He was living the life in there. Kind of a local legend in Chicago. We have the most movable bridges out of any city in the world, 37 in total. We're gonna pass under 16 on the tour today. But we gotta talk about this building coming up on the left. This is one of the newest additions to the Chicago city skyline. Built in 2020, we have the beautiful St. Regis Tower. This is a very good postmodern building. The glass is reflective, it's wavy, it's blue, it reflects the blue waves of Lake Michigan. And notably, this building was built by a Chicago local architect named Jian Gang. And she is actually the female who holds the record of the tallest skyscraper in the world, built by a female architect. That is this tower right here, the third tallest in the Chicago skyline. Now you might notice at the top there's kind of an uncompleted floor that's not still under construction. That's actually a wind tunnel, because this is a solid concrete structure with all these glass window panes. If that wind tunnel wasn't there, it is very likely a high wind would shatter all the glass, and then the $3 million condos property values would go down. Hey, that's where I'm gonna live when the DoorDash money starts to come in. You guys can look forward to it. It's gonna be great. All right, well, we had an architect come along in the 70s. He was kind of a wacky guy. He looked at the skyline and he's like, why are every single building, why is it a square? Why do we only use squares? Squares are boring. I want a building that's a triangle. And he did it. He built the Swiss Hotel right here. He built a triangle building. He said it was because of his love of sailing, as well as the triangular shape to the building gives a better view of the skyline around the city. So it's a very nice building, and if you could stay at one of the two buildings built by Harry Wise, choose this one. The other one is the Chicago Metropolitan Detention Center, so that's the one to pick right there. And right behind it we have the Aqua Tower with kind of crazy balconies that are designed to stupefy the wind. That was built in 2010 by Jian Gang, and it was the tallest skyscraper in the world, built by a female architect at the time it was built. So not only did she do it, she beat her own record. Very cool. This Bubble Man up there. We have some local celebrities on these bridges that like pop up, and you'll see them every once in a while. It's very, very cool. Well, we are crossing underneath this, and we are coming up on a very cool point in the river. But first I want to talk about this clock tower here coming up on the right. That is the Wrigley Building. It used to be home of the Wrigley Chewing Gum, but now is the home of Groupon. And it is a very nice building. It's the only type of building that you will see that is a Renaissance Revival Art Buick's address. It uses 250,000 terracotta tiles, starting at a shade of blue at the bottom, going to lighter shades of all the way white to the top, to kind of draw your eye to the top of the clock tower. It was one of the first beautiful structures built on the Chicago River in a time when it was very much industrial waste. And right here on your right, you are going to see a very fancy Apple store. It's got the glass panels, the sweeping staircase. They're designed by British architect Lord Norman Foster. The roof kind of looks like an iPad. That's probably not a coincidence. But it's a very cool design. But there's something else really cool about this, because the first non-Native American resident who settled in Chicago, trading post would have been right there. A man named Jean Point du Sable of the Du Sable Bridge didn't get credit for finding Chicago for most of Chicago's history because he was an African American. But we have started to rectify that. So we named the Michigan Avenue Bridge after him. And one pointable thing about the Michigan Avenue Bridge is if you would have come to Lake Michigan in the 1800s, Michigan Avenue Bridge is where the lake would have started. Everything that we have drove past to this point is completely man-made. Well, we gotta talk about the tower behind me, don't we? We got no choice. This is the Trump Tower. This is a very nice building, perfect postmodern building, built by Chicago local Adrian Smith. He's the same man who made the Burj Khalifa in Dubai, the world's tallest building. People loved this building when it came out. The switchbacks are very nice. That one's the top of the Wrigley Building. That one's the Marina City Towers. That one's the AMA Plaza. And everyone said it was a great building. And then 5 years later, some of that goodwill was squandered when he put 20 feet tall letters of his name on it. I have no idea. What are you guys waiting in line for? Harry Styles. Oh, how fun. All right, cool. Yeah, that's the One Direction guy, I think. Well, right here on the right, we have this office. This was famously the office of Harvey Dent in Batman the Dark Knight. And it's the second tallest building built by Ludwig Mies van der Rohe. He was the leader of a German movement of architecture where he thought buildings should be functional and boring. So he designed this building to look like an office, because that's what it is, an office. But his students disagreed with him. They thought buildings should be beautiful, they should reflect nature around them. And they had that in mind when they built the Marina City Towers. They built them to look like flower petals coming down from the heaven, landing on the ground. And I think that's such a beautiful idea. It really would be a shame to say that they look more like corn on the cob. So I'm not going to do that. Make your own judgments. But these are a very cool tower. One of the first towers to have a concept of a city in a tower. They have a marina, they have a restaurant, they have the Chicago House of Blues, a music venue, they have gyms, shared community spaces. They were built because we had a problem on the onset of the 70s where people were fleeing downtown Chicago to move into the suburbs. So they wanted to build something that was kind of a community in a high-rise to keep people in the city. So they're very nice towers. And we're coming up right here on the right, this red brick building with the clock tower on top. That is the oldest building that you will see on this tour today. It is the Reed Murdoch building. It was built in 1914. Now, this style of architecture is more common of what you would have seen all over Chicago in the early 1900s. After the fire, we switched from wood, for obvious reasons, to either red brick or limestone. This is one of the only buildings from that time period around, and has actually achieved a historical landmark status, so it should be up forever. But before it achieved historical landmark status, something kind of funny happened. There's actually 6 bays of window on this side of the building and only 5 bays on this, because they had to cut off an entire bay of the building to make room for the widening of LaSalle Drive right behind me. So, yeah, it's kind of funny, just cut off part of the building. Now a historical landmark. Coming up on a very big building here on your right. And for your own sake and the sake of your necks, I'm going to try to stick to the right side of the river, and then I'll do the other side on the way back so you're not breaking your neck. But we got right here this very large Art Deco building built in 1921. This is the Merchandise Mart, and this building is a mammoth, colossal, a dump truck. It's huge. It is the biggest building by square footage in the world at the time it came out. Over 3 million square feet of floor space in this building. And it was the only building in the world to have its own zip code when it came out. It actually had its own zip code all the way until 2009. This was a massive shopping operation during the 1920s. The roaring 20s, you know, you'd go dance to some jazz music, and then you'd come and you'd spend the day shopping in this colossal structure. And you'll notice there's some heads on the pillars right there. Those are actually the heads of my enemies. I put them up there as a display of dominance. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Those are the heads of the leaders of industry of Chicago. The electricity guys, shipping, railroads, Montgomery boards, the people who made Chicago the power that it is. It would be a lot more metal there. Well, we're coming up on a very cool building. Right here on the right, we have the Wolf Point Towers. This is Wolf Point West. The one being finished is Wolf Point East. There will eventually be 3 of these towers. They are the newest buildings on the tour today, and they are on this plot of land owned by the American family, the Kennedys. Very, very powerful people. They used to own the Merchandise Mart too. They sold it off. And Wolf Point is a very famous point on the Chicago River because it's where the river branches to the north and to the south. And if you would have come here in the 1800s, you would have seen a tavern at each shore of the river with little boats bringing you across in a kind of bar hopping motion. Right here at the head of the river, we have the River Point Tower. Beautiful postmodern. It reflects the skyline around it. It has that little arch to whisk away the rain water from the front of the plaza. And if you ask me, it looks like a giant Hot Pocket. I think I'm hungry though. I don't know. Make your own judgment. It's a very nice building. We got to look at this building coming up on the right because this building does not look like it should be able to stay up. It is gravity defying. It's built like this as this large cement structure, and it has these steel beams called inverted trusses that kind of go out this way. And at the top, there are millions of gallons of water tanks to slosh back whenever the wind blows on it. It stops it from falling down. But the reason they built like this is actually a very clever reason. Because here in Chicago, we are the home of the railroad empires of the United States. And the railroad empires invented something very fun, something called air rights. They figured if I own a piece of land, I own that land all the way to the heaven, all the way down to Haiti. on top of the railroads, which run along this entire side of the river, they should have to pay rent. So that building built like that, Beaver 8 through the bottom of it to kind of avoid that. The Bowie building, though, was not so wise. They didn't build that way to avoid the air right crisis. So they actually pay the railroad companies $1.2 billion in rent every year just to be on top of the railroads. Kind of crazy. Also has a very highly modern clock tower at the top of the building. I think it is the largest clock tower in the United States, the highest up. We're coming up on a really cool Art Deco building on the right, built by Graham Emerson Prost in white. We have 2 North Riverside Plaza. This building was built when America was crazy about Egypt. We had just discovered the tomb of King Tut, and we were obsessed. So they built this building to look like the Great Sphinx of Egypt. Yeah, I guess you can kind of see the arm. I think the head would be out there. They decided to cut that out. Notably, this was the first building on the Chicago River to have its front door facing outwards towards the river. Like I said, the river was filthy, but they took a bet that one day it would be clean and it would be a feature, and it really paid off. It was also the first building to have an entire plaza in front of it, which is very common in skyscrapers now. Now, we are coming up on one of my favorite sites on this tour. On the right, you're going to see a one-of-a-kind, state-of-the-art, world-class tarp. Wow, look at it. So nice. And like I mentioned, the railroads do run all along this side of the river. So what these tarps are is just to cover up the ugliness of the railroad. You can see a train going right there, actually. Well, you might be wondering, why are the railroads so big in Chicago's history? And there's a very good reason for it, because Chicago was the home of the shipping industry of the United States. Before there was Amazon, we had these things called mail order catalogs. Montgomery Ward, Sears and Roebuck, you would get a little catalog in the mail with furniture or whatever you wanted to buy. It would go to rural communities, and they would pick what they wanted out of the catalog. They would send the mail back right here to Chicago, and we would ship it out to all over the world. So it should be no surprise that Chicago has the most railroad tracks converging here than any other point in the world. Railroads are what made us huge. And there's a lot of people who got rich for railroads. One guy we'll talk about a little later by the name of Insel is a very interesting character, but we can't stay on him up for too long because we're coming on the tallest building on the Chicago skyline right here on your left. The Willis Tower. Now any Chicagoan knows that Willis actually is pronounced with a little bit of a Chicago accent.
Look at this,
We
Sears
say
Tower.
Willis like Sears. It's a weird accent thing. It was the Sears Tower until 2009. It got renamed, but we're going to call it Sears Tower forever. So I'm going to call it the Sears Tower, and this is the tallest building in the Chicago skyline. 109 floors, 1,450 feet into the sky. It is a colossal building. And right here you'll see this little building with the crown on top of it. That building's actually kind of funny because that crown lights up at night. And when we first put it in, it was so bright, it was disturbing the migratory patterns of birds. And 10,000 birds a year would fly into that tower and fall. Contextualism in architecture. And notably, it was Ferris Bueller's dad's office in the movie Ferris Bueller's Day Off. This was voted the favorite building in Chicago for 2 years in a row. And it's on a very famous street. It is on the famous Wacker Drive. Wacker Drive is the only street in Chicago to have a north, south, east, and west address. It's a triple-decker road with the top level being local, the middle being through, and the bottom being railroads. And it was designed as part of Daniel Burnham's Chicago plan. But the really cool thing about the road that I love is if you watch the movie Batman: The Dark Knight, most of Batman happens in Chicago, so I guess you could say this is Gotham City. But there's a chase scene that happens on Wacker Road. You can see it. It's a triple-decker road.
That's what they did.
Every single concrete that was smashed, all the explosions that happened in that chase scene were real explosions, part of a planned demolition and renovation even of Wacker Road. So that's a very, very cool thing. So if you watch that movie over, you'll really get to see Wacker Road at its finest. And I mean, they really only had one shot at that scene, so it's really, really cool. And the people, when they built 333 West Wacker, they expressed a wish that whoever would build the building right next to it would use masonry to contrast with the building. And luckily, the same firm that built 333 Wacker got the contract to build 225 West Wacker Drive right next door. So they use masonry to kind of contrast, but this is another example of contextualism in a postmodern structure. the little vertical line running up the middle is symbolic of the railroads that made Chicago the titan of the world it is. And you might recognize the top of the structure because it's the same as the top of the structure at the front of Navy Pier. And the spires on top are the same spires used across the way at the merchandise mart. It is a very beautiful building. We love it a lot. As I said, right here is the dip. So eventually you can see it, the little swimming ladders. People will be swimming here and kayaking and having fun in the river. That is as soon as they won't get typhoid fever from swimming in it. That's going to be really cool. But we're coming up on an interesting building because this is the only building you're going to see that half of it was built in the 80s and half of it was built in the 20s. So right here, this is the Builders Building, and this is actually an Art Deco and a postmodern building. And both half of the building were built by the leading firm in the country at the time. So the first half of the building that we're coming up on was built by Skidmore, Owing & Merrill in the 80s. And they really wanted to complement the Art Deco side of the other building. The most common thing you'll notice about Art Deco is these little terracotta tiles with kind of art on them. They have designs, and if you would have seen Art Deco buildings when they were first built, there was actually color in the tile, but a lot of it has washed off now. But it is a very beautiful building with a very unoriginal name. The name Builders Building comes from the fact that this building used to sell building supplies. Very fun. Right here, this is the Cove, a nice little area. You can get some gelato. Eventually, there will be more storefronts here. And we're coming up right here on the Amphitheater. This is a really cool area. People love this. In the summer, it's not uncommon to see some local community theaters doing little plays in front of the Amphitheater, or someone playing guitar. The Chicago River really is becoming a huge feature of the Chicago skyline. But I want to point out the building right here above it. This is a very beautiful building. Formerly United's headquarters. They moved a little bit away. They're still in Chicago. But this is a beautiful building, and it's very special because this is the postmodern style of building that you normally would see out of Greek. So it's heavily inspired by Greek architecture. You can see the columns on top. It's a very, very beautiful building. But I can't spend too much time on it because we're coming up on a very famous building. This starch building with the punched out corners is the Leo Burnett Building. And it is home to the Leo Burnett Advertising Company, who has designed a lot of famous advertising characters like the Pillsbury Doughboy, Tony the Tiger, and perhaps the infamous Marlboro Man. Right in that building right there. And these punched out corners is actually a very clever design because they wanted to build an office with more corner office space. So by punching out the corners like that, that office actually gets 3 times more corner office space than a typical building. Which I guess when you're like a high-level executive, having the corner office is very special. So everyone gets to be special at the Leo Burnett Building. Very, very nice. We're coming up on a kind of dense part of the river. We're right ahead. You guys see that golden top? Kind of looks like a cork. That is the Carbine and Carbide building. And it was built in 1929 to look like a giant champagne bottle because it was the end of Prohibition and they wanted to say, screw you, Prohibition, we're drinking again. So they're boozing it up. The dark green design has the golden cork at the top. And it was built by Daniel Burnham's son, the Burnham brothers. It's interesting because it's an Art Deco building that's more common than what you would see out of New York. The dark green color is more common. We gotta talk about this one. This is my favorite building right here, the Jewelers Building. It's a neoclassical design, and it was originally designed for jewelry exchange. So it was the first building in the world to have a full car-sized elevator where jewelers could drive in with a car full of jewelry, go up, put their stuff away in the safe. Each one of those turrets was part of the building's fire suppression system, and the very top dome in that building was a speakeasy ran by Al Capone called the Stratosphere for high-level politicians. So that is a really crazy and cool building. And right here we have the Mather Tower. The Mather Tower kind of looks like an inverted spyglass due to some zoning restrictions in the 1920s. We were worried when we built skyscrapers over 40 feet that we would block out the sun completely. So they said any skyscraper over 40 feet, the top of the building had to be only 25% of its footprint. So you get this kind of inverted spyglass looking thing. Very cool. And it's right next door to a very historical place. The London House Hotel was one of the most famous jazz clubs in American history, where you'd find like Count Basie and all these big names in Chicago. But we are hitting buildings fast, and right here, this building is more common of what you would see in Europe. On your left, that is the Tribute Tower. Yeah! And it was home to a very famous architecture competition. That style of architecture is called Gothic Revival. Gothic Revival is stripped brown, but without the spire on top. And The architecture competition promised $100,000 in 1920 and promised of construction to whoever built the winning design. This design came out of New York, but a lot of people favored the second place design that came out of Sweden. But that design luckily was built only 5 years later, right across the way on that building right there. Very, very cool architecture competition. Well, we're coming up on the left on a building, and some of you guys might actually recognize the icon on the top of this building right here. You guys know what that is? Nbc Building, that is right. Very, very famous place. That's where I'm going to go when I'm famous on television. But right now it's got Steve Harvey, it's got Judge Navius. But at one very fine time in American history, that was the home to none other than Jerry Springer was filmed there, and it was a very beautiful building. Another one built by Adrian Smith, same guy who did Trump Tower. He was heavily inspired by 30 Rockefeller Center in New York when he built this one. So he built it to look like 30 Rock, and it really is the 30 Rock of Chicago since it's the NBC headquarters. Very cool building. Well, right here on the left, we are coming up on the historical Sheridan Hotel. Built in 1992. Now, if you're a really rich, high-level politician, you got people after you, you don't feel safe anywhere, Sheridan Hotel is where you're going to stay. This building has a helipad on top, so you can land a helicopter, unload. All of the windows are completely bulletproof. It has the largest ballroom in the city at 200,000 square feet and a heated swimming pool on top of the building. That's where I'm going to really stay when the DoorDash pays off. I'll stay there and then vacation there. It's going to be great. $3 at a time, as they say. Well, it was also designed to look like the steamboats that were very common in the Chicago River. So you can kind of see the front boat. That's where the cargo is. And the helipads are kind of like where the steam would come out. So they wanted to pay a little homage to that era of the Chicago River when it was really a big shipping river coming from the Mississippi, leading all the way to the Great Lakes to New Orleans. That was really the significance of the Chicago River. And another thing that we wanted to do, we built this little fountain here, the Centennial Fountain, to symbolize the unity between the north and the south side of Chicago after all the mafia violence ended. Basically, before the mafia violence ended, the north was pretty well known to be the area of the Italians and Al Capone, while the south was known to be the area of the Irish mob. So they were really looked at as different cities, but that will actually squirt a continuous stream of water from the north to the south at the top of every hour for 5 minutes. It used to be 10 minutes, but then a boating company that doesn't have a roof that does tours and is also yellow complained that their tour guides were getting soaked. So they got it back to 5. We really appreciate them for that. Well, we are coming up on the last thing I'm going to talk about on the architecture portion of this tour. And what's interesting about this building is it's not actually built. This empty lot right here, you see those little white plyboards in front of it? That is the Great Wall of Chicago. No, I'm just kidding. That empty lot is actually very special because it was originally planned to be the tallest building in the world. A building called the Spire would have been a spiraling postmodern building, 2,000 feet tall. Now, for reference, again, the Willis Tower is 1,450 feet tall, and all the investment was there. All the money was there. We broke ground on the project in 2008. And then in 2009, housing crash. All the investors pull out. So this lot has been blank ever since then. But there is still conversation that one day, right there will be the tallest building in the Western Hemisphere of the world. I recommend Lou Malnati's or Giordano's. We do have a Giordano's at Navy Pier if you want to check it out. But I encourage you guys, go out, check it out, enjoy the city. Chicago is a great city. It's a great place to be. There's a lot of fun stuff to do. Our museum row is excellent. The Shed Aquarium, Field Museum, and Adler Planetarium. Adler Planetarium was actually the first planetarium in the Western Hemisphere of the world. And they have a really cool orbital theater. So if you're going to go there, check out their space shows because they are really, really cool. The aquarium's a hit. I mean, it's just a great place. Well, we are coming out of the locks, and that means something. That means that our tour is coming to an end. Oh no. What will I do without you? It'll be fine. I hope you guys really have had a lot of fun today. We're going to come here. I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about Navy Pier as we sail in, because it's a very remarkable area. The first thing you're going to notice is this little rock wall in the center of us in Navy Pier. This is actually a little historical place called the Dime Pier where fishermen could pay a dime and spend the day fishing out here. It's no longer that. It's mostly for the seagulls to fish, but they enjoy it a lot. Better than them sitting on our locks and pooping on us. So that's really good. And Navy Pier is a really cool place because it's a place that's gone through renovation after renovation. When it was built in 1892, it was actually a Navy training center. It held that for like until 1940. So they trained for World War I and World War II here, which is why we named it Navy Pier. And then it was the Chicago Institute of Technology had their home here on the water for a little while. Until the 90s, we kind of made it a touristy area. But in the last 10 years, it really has become a place that everyone in Chicago enjoys. They have a beautiful beer garden, so you'll see a lot of Chicagoans stumbling around on the pier. It's a lot of fun. We have Chicago Shakes. It's the top-rated Shakespeare production in the country. It's a really great thing. They have a dark comedy going on right now, one of Shakespeare's last known things. We got the Children's Museum, the Ferris wheel, a huge amphitheater, the beautiful hotels. There's a lot of really great stuff to do on the pier. A lot of really good historical restaurants. It's a taste of Chicago, but there is so much more. I want to let you guys know as we come into the final leg of the story, it is now safe to unbuckle your seatbelts. If you would be kind enough, buckle them right behind you so no one trips on them on the way out. We appreciate it a lot. If you guys did enjoy the trip today, feel free to give us a shout out on TripAdvisor. If you mention us by name, Pat, Swag, and Eric, they will let me go home and sleep tonight. So that'll be really nice. And if you didn't enjoy the tour, you know, and you're on the internet, just go on TikTok, look at cat videos or something. You got better stuff to do than doing some about review, right? Right? Okay, very cool. Very cool. Well, like I said, we are coming to an end. If you guys want to come after Memorial Day, we do have a boat called the Sea Dog Extreme, which is a speedboat ride on the lake. This thing goes 100 miles an hour. We do donuts on it. It's crazy. It's not till after Memorial Day, so if you're only in town a little bit, come back later in the summer. It's a lot of fun. But hey, this is it for my tour today. I hope you guys did have a good time, and thank you for riding on the Sea Dog.
All right, let's give it up for your tour guide, Mr. Clean Self, Patrick. Show some love, guys. All right, you guys are very lucky to have Patrick today as your tour guide. As you can probably tell, he really does know a lot about the city of Chicago. So if you have any lingering questions or you just want to ask for any recommendations for what to do after this boat ride, you'll catch him at the back of the boat while you're disembarked. So feel free to ask him anything back there. And while you're at it, you can also tell him how much you enjoy his tour. Give him a high five, fist bump, pat on the back, rub his head for good luck. No, I'm kidding. Don't rub his head. He's a sea dog. He'll probably bite you. But you can tell him like anything you want to tell him back there. Or maybe you're feeling generous on this beautiful Friday afternoon, so you can also give him a couple $. Keep in mind, guys, most of his income does come from tips and gratuities, and he really is a hard-working guy, and I'm pretty sure he'll appreciate anything you can give him. You must remain in your seat, ma'am. Thank you. Sit down. All right. Speaking of that, you are now free to take your seatbelts off, but please do buckle those seatbelts back up behind you. It is going to help us out, and it will avoid tripping hazard for us, just like Patrick said. But more importantly, you must remain in your seats until Captain Swag tells you when it's safe to stand up and disembark. We're still going to be moving around. We don't want you guys getting here when we're this close to the finish line. All right, folks, that's all we got for you today. Again, on behalf of the crew, thank you so much for cruising with us. Hope you enjoyed the rest of your day. Have fun in Chicago, folks.